Hello everyone. My name is Maya and I'm the Officer of Communications and Content with Solve. And today we have Karla Garcia Teruel. And Karla is the founder of Growth Empowered, a global coaching services firm. And she has a passion to empower social impact entrepreneurs to grow as individuals, overcome challenges, and harness opportunities so they can achieve the impact that they seek to have in the world. She is originally from Mexico, but has lived in a total of 9 countries across America, Europe, Asia, Australia, and South America, which helps her bring multicultural sensitivity and a global mindset to her work. And lastly, she's passionate about not only empowering others in their growth journey, but also in continuing to grow and develop herself. So thank you so much for being with us today, Karla. And the first thing that I just wanted to dive into is, how did you learn about Solve and decide to start coaching our impact entrepreneurs?
Thank you, Maya, and thank you so much for having me here today. So really it was through Alex Samuel. So we connected through an organization called Nexus, and it was back when I was doing impact investing. And she was actually there the moment that I realized that my purpose was to become a coach. And so when I did, she thought that perhaps something was missing in the program, that even though that mentorship was being offered and different trainings was being offered, obviously capital was being given, that's a sort of support that a coach can provide that perhaps would have been beneficial for the solvers.
Thank you. And to start, or I should say to back up even more, what is an executive leadership coach? And maybe what is it not, or stereotypes that people get wrong about, what you do or don't do?
Yeah. So a coach really is a partner, right? It's a partner that engages in a thought-provoking conversation that enables kind of self-awareness, insight that then can lead to drive change. And what I would say is that actually coaching is easy to get wrong because there's no one type of coach out there in terms of executive coaches. For example, I like to use the spectrum between ask and tell. So let's go to the tell side, right? Different type of coach is a sports coach. They're really tellers, right? They're going to tell you how to dribble, how to hit the ball, right? What are the techniques? Very directive, right? In terms of coaching and executive coaching in the purest sense, and a lot of kind of coaching associations talk about this, it's more on the ask side, which is in executive coaching, we believe that you have your own answers, right? That even if I were your identical twin, what works for me might not work for you. And so our job is kind of to ask the right questions to get you to those answers. Reality is all coaches fall amongst the spectrum, and how much percentage of the time they might fall into ask versus tell will be different. And so I think that's one of the things that are kind of more confusing for folks, is that there isn't one way to be an executive coach. The other thing is that one of the misperceptions is that people feel that coaches then are advice givers, right? Because thinking of sports coaches, like, oh, you're going to tell me what to do. You're going to tell me what's right for me. And I would say that's one of the most common kind of frustrations for people is to, well, actually, no, I'm not ever going to tell you what to do. I might have ideas, I might brainstorm with you, but it's up to you to actually find out which one you want to test, which one you want to try. And the beauty of that is that it builds the agency within and the knowledge within of understanding, that's true. What do I want to test? What do I want to do that feels right for me?
So from some of the feedback that we have had from some of our solver teams that you've worked with so closely is, they've really felt empowered and more confident because you do give that autonomy and that power back to them to say you do hold the key to answer your own questions. How do you, help people realize that? Or what are maybe some practices or questions that you challenge them with, between meetings to help them realize their full potential?
Yeah, well, it's through that process of asking questions in of itself, right? So I do get the occasional, so Karla, what do you think I should do? And I always respond with a question, with what do you think you should do? And they're like, well, and then they'll start exploring the different areas. And then I said, okay, great. Now you know what are some things you think you want to try. What else or what other information do you need to know in order to then know which one you want to start with? Or I'm also a big believer in testing. Let's just test one way and see how that goes, right? And actually works really well with entrepreneurs, because obviously that's a lot of what you do in the beginning is testing really quickly to understand how to then adjust and see what works well for you.
So your life has also had a lot of twists and turns. And for anyone that takes a look at your LinkedIn after this, they'll see that you touched so many industries. You also hold a master's in coaching psychology from the University of Sydney, an MBA. You traveled a lot as a child, like we mentioned earlier. You lived in 9 countries, and you work with diverse environments and global corporations, family businesses, startups. And in addition to that, you also worked in the impact investor sphere. So how did you find your way into this career, and what have all of those different aspects of your life, brought into your coaching now?
Thank you. So, well, I would say it found me really, and I do sometimes do some, coaching on the side on transitional coaching, and there's many ways to get at what is the right career path for you for the moment. For me, it found me. So, and I would say it's a way that I came back full circle, because it wasn't until one day, and this was several years ago, that I was amongst a group of people that I knew part of them, the other part, half I knew, half I didn't. And this one person was sharing about her life. And everybody else does what people do to be friendly, which is, try to support, say, you've got this, don't worry about it, it's all going to work out. And I, in that moment, was curious. And I just asked her, hey, asked her some questions about what was going on, was noticing a couple of things and kind of connecting some dots for her around some hypotheses I was having about what might be going on for her. And it was in that moment she turned around and she's like, wow, you've helped me more than any person I've ever spoken to. And it was literally in that moment, like a light bulb turned on. I had tears in my eyes, and I'm like, this is my purpose. This is what I'm meant to do in the world. But when I started telling people I wanted to become a coach, everybody's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because the reality is that it was always there. So ever since I was little, because I had moved around so much, it actually affected my own mental health and well-being. And so I had a psychologist when I was in high school. I then had an AP psychology course where we actually were holding kind of a space of no judgment to understand people such as serial killers. And I was like, wait, we can do that. We can just hold off the judgment for a second to understand what might be happening for someone. And I just fell in love with that frame and that way of looking at the world. And so that's what led me to study psychology and sociology in undergrad. Having said that, it was so funny because when I graduated, I actually had a conversation with a guy who I believe was like a coach or slash did, team building exercises for people. And I thought it was amazing. I said, how can I join? And he's like, unfortunately, I don't hire at your level. I hire with people already with at least 15 years of experience. So I thought, all right, that's not for me. And I forgot about it. So I went down the corporate path mainly because I got addicted to living in different countries. And that was one way that I thought I could still, and I did. And I didn't feel fulfilled by that. I was doing marketing and it was just not for me. And so that's when an opportunity came up for me to do impact investing. I didn't even know that it existed. I was like, wait, you can do good and be a business at the same time. You don't have to choose. And I did impact investing, which then led me to lead one of the social startups. And I think it was through that journey that I then looked for help, because something that tends to happen is that when you're a leader, it's very easy to feel alone. You rarely have a space where you can really share your fears, your thoughts, your doubts, and know two things: either one, that you're going to be received with no judgment, or two, that it won't impact the other person somehow, right? Because you might have your board, your team, or even co-founders, but you know that what you're sharing, especially if it's a fear or doubt, it might impact the other person and how they feel. And so I had a coach at the time, and that's really, I think, what then ultimately led me to that one moment of knowing that that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying, the unique problems that entrepreneurs and founders have specifically, have you seen any trends or really key fears that kind of unite a lot of the entrepreneurs and business leaders that you've worked with over the years?
Well, there's a variety of fears. I think one of the fears that I think I see a lot of, it's not so much, it's interesting because it can come off as maybe fear of failure or fear of success, which is interesting, right? Also a very common one, I would say this one in particular, is fear of potentially letting go of control, right? Fear of truly delegating. And I see that especially once you start growing, right? Because when you're a founder, well, yeah, it's you and you do everything. You have a small team and that's fine. And you can have all the control you want, or at least it's easier to have that. But as soon as you start growing, right, you start getting more people and it starts becoming a larger kind of organization, then you don't have that. And that's that fear of, if I'm not there to make sure to do things well, then will it fall through? And that's something that definitely I help people kind of work through.
That's so relatable on a business sense and a personal sense. I think we all hate giving up control because it just leads to so much anxiety and uncertainty, especially when, these entrepreneurs, they have their finances on the line, they have their families, they're moving so many times, and now they have this business stake and almost like reputation and ego, not in a bad word at all, in a good sense, your self-worth being tied to a business, and that must be so stressful for people, but you're helping them through that, which is amazing. Can you share specific examples that you're really proud of growth or success that a client has had since working with you? Or maybe some that have been with you for a long time and you're like, wow, I got to see their whole career journey.
Well, I feel like I feel proud of all my clients because the truth is it takes a lot of courage and work to create change. And especially because I say, the majority and the bulk of the work is done by them, right? The coaching is just a session, but a lot of it is what happens in between sessions and what they put into practice. But I would say, one of the things that I love coaching on is confidence. And there was someone who unfortunately had a whole host of no's and criticisms, and they were starting out. And so I had gotten to them and it really brought them down and were starting to doubt themselves. And then through work that we did together, we were able to uncover what's underneath, what are her strengths, to remember the why she started what she was doing and why she believed it could work. And then realized actually uncovered that self-belief that she already had, but because of the no's, she started forgetting. And so by the end, she was able to pull up and have that self-validation enough to then go back out and be able to be prepared to hear those no's. Another example is I also work a lot with people on managing people in general, but especially managing your team, because it's very common to want to manage others as you would like to be managed, because we just assume that what motivates us motivates others, or we assume that how we would take something to mean is how others would take it to mean. And so working through with this person, what we did is understanding what are the different types of motivation, and then understand what motivates them, and then also what could motivate this other person, and understand how to test that out and how to get more information. And also there's a lot of situations where we get triggered, and so understanding what are we assuming about what that person said, and how do we test out to understand if that's true or not. And that really helped them then be able to build better relationships with their team and then be able to bring out the best in them. So that's another example that I love. And I think if I had to add a third one, because it's also something I tend to coach a lot on, and especially entrepreneurs and impact entrepreneurs, because as you said, they have a lot riding on their shoulders. But it's not just because of their own self-image, but also because of impact entrepreneurs. They really care about the impact they're seeking. So they put on top of that if I don't work harder, then I'm also hurting others, right? And so it's a double whammy that they put on their shoulders. So the third area is also that burnout / balance kind of example. And so it's there I help someone be able to understand first defining what balance is. Because when we say balance, it assumes that both sides are equal, because that's what a balance looks like. The reality, it's not that. And actually, my balance might not be your balance, because I might be a different stage in my life. I might have a different family situation going on. So it starts with defining what is balance. And sometimes it's just a little tiny change, right? I worked with one person who was like, worked really late hours and worked on the weekends, but they wanted to continue doing that. And what we found was like, it was just one small change of being able to take more time with the partner and be able to take a little bit more time right before dinner. And that created a big shift. And also reframing some of the parties that she had. We keep so much this long to-do list. We don't realize that in our mind, we've already know we're not going to do half of them, but we don't physically do it. So it keeps reminding us we have all this to do. And so she took some of those off, and then whew, all of a sudden she felt much better, and she was feeling more balanced and more in control. So those are just some examples of things that I've worked on with different clients.
So a lot of your approach is different from other coaches. I mean, every coach is unique. With your master's in coaching psychology, has that played a large role, or what other things differentiate and what guides your methodology in leading every individual? And I think something that you and I have talked about before is that your coaching is individualistic. It's never a templatized approach. It's not the same for one founder that you do for another executive. So if you could talk a little bit about that, I think that would be so helpful.
Yeah, so definitely my master's in coaching psychology has very much influenced the way that I coach. And I think one of the ways it has is that in that master's, we learn from so many different types of theories and areas of psychology, right? So from, cognitive behavioral theories to behavioral change theories to understanding leadership theories to even positive psychology, so what leads to human flourishing. And that means that I have a whole host of different tools. And so for me, that's why I knew actually there's no one size fits all, right? There could be different things that are happening for someone, and it's about finding the one that they want to try out, or the tool that they want to use in that moment, or the framework that might help them in that particular time to shift perspective. And so even in my own personal development journey, I've realized there's so many amazing things out there that can really help you, but not all of them are going to help me in right now, and not actually, maybe they will in the future, right? So what might not work right now, it just might be a timing thing. So definitely, I think that's what it did. The other thing it did is that in my own personal development journey, I think the masters helped me with this, was understanding. For me to change, for some reason, when I understand myself better, it allows for the change to happen. So there are some coaches that are very much more solution focused, which is, okay, what's the issue? What's the change? And let's go brainstorm really quickly. What are some solutions that we can start really applying to it? And that can work for many situations, especially if there's not a deeper thing that's preventing you from it. For me, what I realize is that sometimes it's better to go a little bit deeper to understand, where's this block? Where is it coming from? And what do we need to go to then change that? And so by understanding ourselves a little bit better as to what might be driving our behaviors or a way of being or mindset, it just helps unlock then the opportunity to change it. So I definitely focus on that. And then finally, I have a whole person approach. So because I've learned about so many different theories, and by the way, I'm constantly learning, I'm always doing more programs, more things, because I believe, again, it's not one size fits all, but also it's informed my way of looking at the individual, which is I do whole person coaching. I mean, I call myself executive coach because that is what people know as a term, but I would say as I work with founders and leaders as a whole person, because sometimes, yes, there's a professional issue, but really the place to unblock what's happening and their ability to grow as a leader, sometimes it's what's happening at home or in the personal life. Or for example, with triggers, usually what triggers you, it's not just in a setting that it triggers you. Usually it's something that triggers you no matter who it is, whether it's in your personal, professional life. So I would say that's the other way that it's informed the way I coach.
It sounds like a lot of the things that you explore with people during sessions can also be really vulnerable. So hypothetically saying that I was someone coming to you for a first time coaching session, what does that look for? And how do you, learn what the entrepreneur or leader or just person that you're working with needs, and how you can tailor the approach to make them comfortable with you and to, gain that rapport so that you have, a really good relationship and you can get down to the root of exactly what they're seeking out of the experience?
Yeah, so generally the way I start with anybody is we have a 30-minute kind of introductory meeting where I explain a little bit of what is coaching, what it's not, my approach. And then I just pass it on to them saying, what brought you to look for coaching, right? And especially with solvers, where many of them, it's not that they were looking for it, it's an opportunity being offered to them. It's saying, well, what are some of the topics you think you might want to explore in coaching? And I start there. And then as I hear them speak, I then say, okay, what do you think is blocking you in that area? And they might have some hypotheses. And then I work on that to then go deeper. And so for me, I think what I bring is, and many coaches do bring this, is just a place of curiosity, right? There's different ways of asking questions where it might come off as judgmental or it might come off as purely, really just curious, right? And then once they open up more, it's about being able to normalize what they're going through. Sometimes it's very common for founders in particular, because they're so siloed, where they think that what they're going through, it's just them who are feeling it. And so a lot of the work that I do as well is normalizing that, which when you have a group coaching scenario, that's done naturally, because as soon as one person opens up about something, somebody else is like, oh, wait, I'm not the only one going through something like that. But in the lack of a group, I bring that to the table and I try to help them understand themselves better and how what they're going through is something that many other people go through as well.
And I'm sure that that's impacted so many people. How many people have you worked with since beginning your coaching? And also, excuse me while I plug in my computer, it's dying. But I'm
Oh no, go ahead. I've worked with more than, I think now I'm in the 300. Yeah.
And do you have a longest person that you've worked with? I think one you were on a podcast recently.
Yes, that is true. So I have a client, which was actually, she was my first paying or paid client. And we worked for around 2 years together. And then she became a coach herself and then had a, podcast and interviewed me on her episode, and one episode, which was actually so fulfilling.
That must be really great to see someone that like you have inspired since go on and do it to other people. So it really is just like exponential, which is amazing. And I know from the feedback that I've read from the Solver team, specifically with us, you have been so impactful. And, we could talk all day about your approach and your psychology approach to it as well, which I think is fascinating. But the last question that I have for you is, what are daily habits or principles that you use in your own life or for the people nearest and dearest to you? How do you coach yourself? How do you keep yourself accountable? How do you take care of yourself when you're doing this for so many people all the time?
Thank you. Well, I guess the first principle is to take care of myself first. And I think it's one that a lot of people know, but they don't know how to do until they realize the potential of when you take yourself first, you can do way more for others. And so what that looks like for me is I have a couple of habits that I've started since several years ago already. One is in the morning, I wake up and I do not look at my messages or emails or texts, nothing. So that was hard to start. However, I remember when somebody told me this image, and I was like, really stuck with me. It's like, imagine when you wake up, you're in your bed and you're inviting 100 people into your bedroom to talk to you at the same time. That image is so overwhelming. I was like, yes, who would ever want to do that? And so ever since then, I stopped doing that. So I don't look at anything. And the first thing I do after I brush my teeth is then I do either a mindfulness exercise or I meditate, depending on what I need that day. And so what that allows me to do is because I used to wake up with a lot of anxiety. And so by looking at my phone, that would increase, as you can imagine, exponentially my anxiety. And so by starting with a meditation or mindfulness exercise, it brings me to that present moment and it gives me what I need in that moment, whether it's being able to check in with my body, whether it means maybe doing a gratitude meditation where then it elevates my emotions. It gets me in a very beautiful emotional state to start the day. So that's very key for me. Another thing that I do to take care of myself is move every day. And so I call it move specifically because it's about making sure I move my body, whether that means going to the gym, exercising, walking, maybe dancing in my room, but it's about making sure that I'm moving my body in some way every day. And then I also then take care of my nutrition. So food is extremely important. And so I try to listen to my body and make sure that I'm eating whole foods and really putting nutrition into my body. And then lastly, what I think I try to do very intentionally, and I think this is what helps me coach myself, if you will, is to check in. It's so easy to be on the move. It's so easy to be constantly thinking about the future or about the past, rarely in the present moment. And it's so easy to be driven by our emotions without even realizing it, right? A very common one is when we end the day and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm so tired, I just want to watch TV. There's something else happening in that moment that we're wanting to avoid. Or what else tends to happen for me is wanting a chocolate in the afternoon. So it's like, all right, I don't really need this. What's going on? So I check in, and there's a couple of ways to do that. One is through meditation or like doing a body scan where you're just checking your body and seeing what you're noticing, what tensions you're feeling, and then what emotions might be coming up for you. And the other one is journaling. So journaling is super powerful, just writing down what's coming up for you. And what that does is two things. One is I can check in, how do I feel right now? And usually there's several emotions, there's rarely just one. And then second, what do I need then right now? And that could be different things. Sometimes it's, I need to process this emotion. Sometimes it might be, oh, I need to then reframe, or I need to then shift into a more positive emotion. Then I do that. But I always check in, make sure to check in and understand what's happening for me in any given moment.
You're coaching for yourself and for everyone else. It's physical, it's emotional, it's psychological, it's focused on the business side. It's just so holistic. And I feel like you've added, so much value, especially, on behalf of Solve and our Solver teams. So thank you for, everything that you do and offering, yourself to us. And we're just really grateful to have you in our community. And we appreciate you being here today to share everything that you've learned over the past several years being a coach. So thank you.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you so much to you guys. I feel grateful for the opportunity to get to coach the Solvers because, to be honest, you guys have such an amazing community. Every year I say I fall in love all over again with my clients in the sense of what they're doing and who they are. So be able to help them in their journey to have the impact that they're looking to have in the world. So I'm grateful to you guys for allowing me the opportunity to do that. So thank you so much, and thank you for having me today.